Hey, welcome back to the UPRAWR Podcast. Today we sat down with Leander, a manager that's worked with some of the biggest bands in the UK, including Architects and Neck Deep. We talk about the history of Neck Deep, we talk about As It Is His reunion, and joining Future History Management, one of the UK's fastest growing rock management labels.
So I think the place to start then is, how did you get started in the music industry?
I was in a band at college, and then that band got a smidge more serious after. I was in that band all through college and all through uni, and then after uni it got a bit more serious. It stopped being kind of like a hobby band, and we tried to actually sort of do it. And at the time there was a scheme called New Deal for Musicians, which was something that Tony Blair's Labour had brought in, right. And it enabled you to essentially be claiming levels of government support to be an artist, provided you could prove that you were doing it. And so I was able to get through like a couple of years of being in this band and not have to worry too much about like having a job, because it worked like benefits.
That's pretty cool, man.
It was from the government, and it allowed me to like get my rent paid and have like a basic living wage to be in a band, provided I could prove that it was actually a serious endeavour and not just kind of like, you know, rehearsals in a function room or what have you. And we got an agent who's still working now, Ross Warnock at UTA.
It's a pretty big deal, agent.
Yeah. He was. It was agency group back then.
Yeah,
but he was booking a lot of our peers, Johnny Truant, Goes to 1,000, Sixth, all this kind of stuff. And so we got an agent, and we were signed to Mighty Atom. And none of this stuff is like big deal at all, really, relatively speaking. But
Ross Warnock's pretty big deal as an agent.
Oh yeah, Ross for sure. But like a lot of the stuff we achieved, like compared to most of those bands I just mentioned,
yeah.
And even like, you know, Hondo McLean and like Days in December, even like a lot of the bands we were part of the scene with, did sort of bigger stuff than we did. But it was kind of legit enough that I formed connections through Ross mostly with some people that worked in music. And then when the band split up, alongside that I was also writing. So I did a degree in media and a postgrad in journalism, and I wanted to be a journalist. That's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a music and film journalist. And so I started writing for Terrorizer magazine, which isn't around anymore, and then was kind of doing that in the band and just kind of piecing together, not a living, but like could survive whilst pursuing these things. And when the band then split up, I realised mid-2000s this was, like freelance journalism wasn't going to really pay my bills and earn me any sort of living. So I did an internship in London at Atlantis Records in the publicity department, which was part of Warner, and Atlantis did a scheme back then called the Warner Graduate Scheme, where if you were a recent university graduate and you wanted to work in music, you could go through this kind of like almost like an X Factor to essentially end up being like an assistant in the publicity office or an assistant in the A&R office or what have you.
Awesome.
So I did this, and I got down to like the last few. I didn't actually get the posting, but from it I got given a summer's worth of interning at Atlantis Records. So I did that.
Were you like 21, 22?
This is when I'm 24.
Oh, 24, okay.
Yeah. And so that summer, I'd kind of done my band for a few years, and then I'd gone into this.
Right.
And so that's this one summer I did a couple of months of commuting to High Street Kensington and working in the Warner building in the publicity department. It was the summer that, ironically, Funeral for a Friend were releasing Hours, and The Darkness were releasing their second record. So I worked in the publicity department, just basically doing scans of feature coverage. You'd get like press reports from this company called Shadowfax, these long printouts of like, your artist has been covered on page 5 of this magazine and like page 3 of this magazine and this paper and whatever. And so it was my job to go through this big stack of print press, just like scan it all to create like daily reports that just were circulated internally. but it gave me some sort of sense of what working in publicity was. And whilst I was there, I got access to sort of music industry subscription-based newsletters like Record of the Day, where you would see job postings that like a layman or someone outside of the business wouldn't necessarily see. And I saw a Record of the Day job posting for a rock specialist PR, and I just applied for it, just sort of threw my hat in the ring. Ended up getting a job interview there, and just sort of blagged my way into it. It was working for a company called Velocity PR, for a chap called Andy Saunders, who had a long history working mostly. He worked for Oasis. He was Oasis's publicist in their absolute heyday, and had built his own company, Velocity, off the back of it. And he's still working now, Andy, and has more corporate clients now, and he does like the Artist Manager Awards. Right, he's one of the people behind that. But he hired me to be his like rock metal specialist PR, not really knowing. He gave me a shot. I'm not sure whether he knew that I had as little a clue really of what I was doing, but I sort of publicised my way into the role by just sort of talking. I was always been a passionate music fan, so I knew my onions when it came to the actual music. Yeah. Just the job role, I didn't necessarily have the experience, but because I'd come from an Atlantic Records internship, I guess maybe it gave the perception that I knew more than I did. Yeah. But anyway, I think that was quite instructive, and I think what you find a lot in music work, or I have found anyway since, is that learning on the job is often the best way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. So I just kind of started doing the job, and because I had been a journalist, I had received press kits and bios and PRs and stuff like that, and I had a proclivity towards writing. So it was really just kind of going, oh, I now have to be the person that's writing these like PRs rather than the person who's receiving them. Yeah. And so I just kind of figured it out, and I was given MXPX was my first client. That's cool as fuck. It was just given to me by the company. I worked at MXPX for Side One Dummy, just one album campaign, just did the UK PR for it, and then I was working a TV channel at the time called Rock World TV, for which I ended up doing some presenting. But initially it was just supposed to be like helping them organise their PR launches and all this kind of stuff. So that's why Andy had hired me, because he had a few like rock clients, and his background wasn't really in rock and metal. So he then said, you should bring in your own clients. And I'm from Brighton, and my local band was Architects. And so they were 17 at the time. And I knew those guys they'd come to my band's shows. They were the kids at the shows that my band and like Johnny Sherman and Ghost of a Thousand stuff were playing in Brighton. They were the sort of next gen, and they had opened for my band and Devil's Side of Soul at a venue in Brighton. I was kind of aware of them and had become friendly with Tim, who now works for Fender. And I bumped into him literally in the street and was like, wait, does Architects need PR? And he was like, well, yeah, we're actually just signed to In at the Deep End, and we're going to release this record, Nightmares. And so I think we probably would like PR. So I just wrote to the chap at In at the Deep End and was like, I will do your PR. I won't charge you. Just to, to sort of get the client, because Andy had given me the freedom to do that. So I brought Architects in, and then that just kind of took off. We got a lot of Kerrang coverage, a lot of Metal Hammer coverage, a lot of Terrorizer coverage straight out the gates. This is a couple of years even before Sam joined the band. Wow. And so through doing that at the higher levels already, and organising like full page features, 2-page features, stuff with Guitar World, whatever, because obviously Nightmares is a very virtuoso guitar record. I know it helped me really learn quickly, trial by fire, on how to sort of work with a fast emerging artist, And so when Sam joined the band, things started getting heating up for them in the sort of wider industry, touring and label interest. And I just naturally fell into the role of also doing management tasks. We never really gave it a name. I just started doing more stuff for them.
So did they not have a manager at that point?
They had worked with someone in a sort of loose sense,
right?
But they didn't feel like they had anything like especially proper.
Yeah.
And they just asked me to increasingly do more stuff. Their agent at the time was Ross, who I had a relationship with, obviously through my own band.
Yeah.
So he and I had a rapport, and it just kind of naturally, I don't know, just sort of ended up happening. And it wasn't until Sam, actually, as a new member of the band, introduced me to someone as their manager that I was like, I guess that is what I'm doing. So yeah, it's kind of convoluted, weird little path, but that's how I kind of got from band member to being an artist manager. It's kind of all a bit happenstance and all a bit kind of like an opportunity here has presented itself. I was kind of follow that, take the opportunity, follow the path, see where it leads. And yeah, I was fortunate that, really very fortunate that Architects were such a great band, are such a great band, and that they were able to, that we had this kind of relationship that I was able to kind of, that we were able to work together like that.
That's awesome, man. I mean, there's so many people that where we sit down and we talk, it sort of sounds like they got lucky because the first band they dealt with blew up.
Yeah.
But also it's obviously not luck because there's like 100 other people around that band that didn't take those opportunities. So you really see that the people that are actually like, they find their first band, but they've actually worked their ass off for like years.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was really hard work. I worked really hard for them. And I think that one of the reasons it worked so well is because we connected as people.
Yeah.
We had similar musical sort of interests and sort of were in agreement on what the sort of scope of Architects was. A lot of people listen to Nightmares especially and considered them to be this kind of mini Dillinger. But I felt that I could already hear this kind of like bigger band inside it.
So as they grew then, did you have to leave your job doing PR?
Yes, yeah. I left my job doing PR in 2007 to go with Architects full time. Basically, it was not long after Sam joined, and it started becoming like a more legit enterprise. I wanted to devote more of my time to it, and so I quit my job in London and started just working for Architects essentially full time. Like, I would almost call it like I was like their assistant. I was like Architects' personal assistant. I went on tour with them and I helped sell merch and helped advance shows. I did like elements of tour management work. I wouldn't say I was ever like, when I see some of the amazing tour managers that are out there right now, I'm like, I was not doing that job, but I was doing like a version of it for Architects level back then.
Yeah. And
so I was kind of just with the band doing bigger picture stuff, but also doing day-to-day stuff and just kind of what did the project need? What did the band need? And so we did that for like a couple of years together.
How much influence did you have? Did they just come to you and say, this is what's happening, help us? Or did you sit down and you come up with the sort of strategies with them?
Yeah, we came up with it together. We were in a social circle heavily at the time. We were really just part of the same group of friends as well. Like those guys would hang out at my house. Myself and Tom and Dan used to watch 24 together all the time, and we watched Lost together all the time. Like we were just like a friendship group, and so the sort of business and friendship side of it was very interwoven. We were just always sort of talking about the band, and so it's kind of hard to say really back then. Obviously, they handled all the music is all them, but I think I had some influence in kind of like what the aesthetics of the records were like what the artwork looked like, track listing, stuff like that. I remember Tom playing me a demo of the song Hollow Crown, Early Doors, and being like, is this too bold to put on the record, do you think? And so I was often like, I guess, a somewhat objective opinion for them to sort of bounce stuff off. And certainly back then we were all very in tune with each other musically, and I think I feel like they trusted my understanding of what they were trying to do, and so we bounced off each other a lot. And then when it came to being signed to Century Media and stuff like that, I took care of all the business interests, so I represented what they wanted to do to the label and became the kind of funnel between the agent and them. And
What was that like when you were doing that then? If that was sort of a lot of those things for the first time,
Yeah.
did you feel like you're in over your head, or was it just...
yeah, definitely. Like I said, I was learning on the job, and so there were definitely things that would come up, like, you know, withholding tax in Europe. You know, I would have no clue over that, and it was like, oh right, I should have done X amount of paperwork. Right, noted. You know, and I don't think there were any like colossal mistakes that led to like, you know, oh my gosh, we have lost thousands of dollars because of pounds because of X, Y, Z. But there were definitely times where I was like, right, should have definitely known that. And I think, you know, me now would not have gone as lightly on like deal negotiations as I did back then. Back then we were all very excited about a label being interested, about Century Media being interested. And I think that there was a naivety, certainly, that I had back then, being more inexperienced, that led to me not pushing too hard on like a deal negotiation, for example. So maybe the Century Media deal, very, very likely the Century Media deal they signed back then is probably not the best deal. And had I been a bit more versed in things, or a lot more versed in things, I could have, you know, but that's all hindsight stuff.
Yeah, of course, man.
It was fine to us at the time.
Like at the time, was that a case of like, I don't want to push my luck and lose the deal?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, yes. And not having kind of the experience to know that like all these sorts of deals are negotiations.
Yeah.
And that most offers are lowball positions, and you go in highball and you go blah, 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 until you get to sort of the middle ground where everybody's happy. And that you can trust more in, you know, lawyers and the fine print and all these kind of things. There was a lot of excitement. It was quite easy to get swept away when it's your first time, like, oh my gosh, I bought records that are on Century Media, how exciting, you know. And so that sort of naivety and first time excitement definitely plays into it.
Were the bands part of those meetings with you, or did you go in on your own?
That would have been me on my own for the most part. They definitely met with the label. I remember some meetings with the label, like early days when they were kind of courting. But the negotiations were myself, a lawyer, and myself and a lawyer, and then going back to Century Media and then taking their response or what have you. But yeah, those things were certainly not as thorough as they should have been. But you know, the band's still standing right now, and it's like a very big band, so we didn't do anything
It's definitely
that was too damaging for the longevity.
So when and why did you stop working with them?
We parted ways because they had an opportunity to move to 5B on a worldwide management contract. So when 5B initially approached the band, summer, I think it was 2008, it was the summer after Hollow Crown came out, and the band was like really leveling up. So Hollow Crown was really a big level up for them, and a lot of the things they were doing, but off the back of that record, like they headlined a sold out Islington Academy, they had like a really amazing set at Download Festival that year, all this kind of stuff. Like the band was going up a notch. And we were starting to hit the US as well, although the first Architects US tour was somewhat of a disaster, but they were starting to gain traction.
Why was it a disaster?
Just lost a lot of money.
Okay.
It was the wrong package, ultimately. We accepted a tour that was supposed to have Dillinger on it, and then Dillinger ended up not doing it, and Architects ended up being a bit of a fish out of water on a deathcore tour.
Okay.
And it was just not the right thing. It just ended up not really working out on all fronts. Completed it, survived it, but nevertheless, the band was starting to gain traction everywhere, and 5B got in touch, and were interested in speaking to the band for management, and because the band and I had a close relationship, we'd been together years at this point, they forwarded that to me to like look into. And so I spoke with Joey, who was at 5B at the time. He's still their manager, architects manager to this day. Right. But I spoke to him, and he's at Madden now, but he was at 5B back then. And I spoke with him, and we sort of figured out that, I mean, I was the first to put my hand up and say we definitely need support in America. Like this, the touring so far has not been the greatest, and we could really do with that sort of leg up. And so I saw it as an opportunity for the band for sure, but at the time I thought it was one that could perhaps include me also
moving to 5B with them.
Yeah, right. So that was kind of the hope. And so I negotiated helped negotiate like a co-management agreement where 5B would work the band in North America, and I would look after them everywhere else, and we would kind of do it in coordination.
I mean, sorry, just to give people context, 5B have bands like Slipknot,
yes,
Baby Metal, Motionless in White. Like they're a huge management company globally.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when I first saw the 5B offices in New York, it had like mixed guitar hanging on the wall, and Slipknot gold records everywhere, and this kind of stuff. Like really, amazing agency.
Yeah.
Who have worked with Trivium as well, like some of the biggest.
I went to the offices in LA, and it was the first time I'd been into like a metal office, and was like, holy shit, like
this is how big this genre can get.
Yeah. Like everything else I'd seen is like you're in a small room in the big place, or it's just a small room. Mm-hmm. Like theirs was like, that was the big place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like amazing opportunity for them, and I was not going to let any ego or like sense of entitlement or anything like that block the band's progress. I just felt at the time, whether that's naive or not, I felt at the time that this sort of expansion could include me.
Yeah.
And so we negotiated this deal, and that only stayed in place for a very short time, and very quickly the band made the decision to go with 5B worldwide, which truthfully I as much as it was painful at the time, I completely understand why they made that decision. They were my first management client.
Yeah. Did you fall out over it, or?
I wouldn't say we fell out, but we didn't talk for a little while.
Yeah.
And there was some repair that needed to be done from both sides. I obviously was hurt by it, and there was just a few things that went down in the kind of breakup of it all. It's like any relationship breakup, really.
Yeah,
it is a breakup, especially after that amount of time and how interwoven our lives were.
How long had you been with them at that point?
4.5 years. But not only had we been working together, but we had been on tour together. We were in the same social groups, They'd stayed at my house, I'd stayed at their house. Like we were properly like, it wasn't just like I'm the suit that does the business affairs. Like we were properly interwoven. And so there was more fallout from it than just like, I don't work with architects anymore.
Yeah.
And so, for a time I was having to sort of figure out when they weren't going to be at places, like shared spaces.
Yeah.
So that I could go and hang out with certain people and stuff like that. So certain things needed to be rebuilt. But they did. It took about a year for things to rebuild. But then, by the time The Here and Now came out, which was like the next record, we were mates again. And we've stayed friends ever since.
I guess it's like easy to see why you'd fall out, but easy on both sides to see why the other person would be upset and
Absolutely.
Why the move was probably very necessary for them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think they should have made that move. They made the absolute right move for their career. And truthfully, I think that for myself in my own career progression, it was the best thing that could have happened to me also. Like, not saying I wish for that kind of level of disappointment or what have you, but I learned a lot from that. From that being my first band, I kind of got a very all-inclusive experience in the sense of, you know, they were my first client. I got to experience this like rise, but then I also got to experience like a loss. And a lot of the ways that the band and I parted ways have been instructive for me in my career since. Like, I've always since sought to try and protect myself and try and insulate myself and be part of an agency, not sort of like a lone person that can be that have the band poached off them. I mean, I don't think that 5B poached it. I'm not saying that at all, but like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're saying.
I very consentingly did the deal with 5B, so that it was not in any way like a poaching, but losing an artist like that and being vulnerable like that when it's like a big agency versus me by myself, that's the thing I wanted to kind of avoid in future. And I think it was just a good learning for me to kind of to feel like rejected, and then over time, as those things healed, as the rawness of it healed, to be able to reflect on, well, why would they want that, right? What am I not offering? Where are my shortfalls? And it made me consider, like, do I actually really want to do this as a job, right? Because being architect's manager was, as I've explained, like a bit of happenstance, a bit of an accident. And I think I did a good job of setting them up and being an integral part of the kind of early years foundation.
Did you feel like you'd lost a bit of your like identity? If you'd spent 4 years being like the guy with architects at the festivals and at the shows, and like, what are you now without it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was once in an argument with a professional argument with someone who I'm not going to name, but another person in the business who, in a moment of spite, said that I was known as the guy who lost architects. And that was a real stinger for me. I was like, really, is that what's defining me? And I don't think that's necessarily was true.
Was this early on after that you'd lost?
It was not long after.
Right.
Yeah. It was a spiteful exchange, shall we say. But that always stuck with me as well. I was like, I don't want kind of shortcomings and losses, you know. 4 years with the band, and I should be known for like the positive contributions, not the fact I lost the band or what have you. And so there was definitely a lot of things to reflect upon, and I had lost a sense of identity from it, and it made me feel, because I went straight from my band into kind of doing this, like I was almost processing like, who am I without my band? Who am I without architects? Like, I was able to sort of seamlessly merge these two things, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, now I'm just sort of me and have to sort of figure out, what do I actually want to do? Do I still want to do this job? And if so, how do I want to do it? And what can I learn from where I went wrong with architects, or like moments where I made bad decisions or didn't have the right amount of information or the right amount of backing or infrastructure or what have you. And so it ended up being a very important piece of learning for me. And, you know, look at the band, they're still with Joey, and they've flourished.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy for them. You know, I'm super stoked. They're my friends, and it's great to see them to have gone on to achieve the things that they've achieved. Like, I feel vindicated.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw more than a band that sounds like Dunder Escape Plan.
Yeah.
I saw a bigger band living inside of that, and I helped in those early years to nurture that and to sort of augment it and try and bring it out of itself. And the band that stands there today, I think, is, you know, somewhat that band that I recognised. So I'm proud of that. I still feel a sense of pride in what they've gone on to achieve.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, I guess it makes it a little bit easier knowing that if they had to part ways, it was for something that was worthwhile, and it didn't just like collapse and you're like, oh, look, fucking idiots who fucked it up. Like,
right, exactly.
Seeing that actually everything worked out is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're I believed back then in 2007 that they were an important band. and they still are. You know, they're a festival headline level artist, and you know that's it. It's been, I think, ultimately, despite the remark that I referred to, I think actually the fact that I worked with architects in those very exciting years has ended up being a more positive calling card for me over time.
Yeah.
And it's helped define that I have. I feel one of my main skill sets is that I can recognise talent early, and architects is kind of good proof of that. It's like a
Proof
good
of concept.
something I can. Yeah, it's proof of concept. Something I can point to and go, architects.
Moving on from that, then.
Yeah.
You've thought about, do I really want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
You've obviously decided you do want to do this. What was that next step? Then you've got no band.
Well, I had started working whilst I was still with architects.
Okay.
In the final year of my working with architects, I started working with a couple of other bands, including Lower Than Atlantis.
Oh, where?
And Lower Than Atlantis were starting to make what became Fark You, the record Fark You. They were starting to make that record during that period. And when architects and I parted ways, I took some of my settlement money, some of my buyout money from the architects' settlement, and I put it into Lower Atlantis. And so that was kind of my next step. Once I decided that I wanted to continue doing it, I kind of thought, put your money where your mouth is, sort of thing. And I did. It wasn't like a ton of cash or anything like that, but I invested some of what I'd been paid out to help build LTA. So I helped front some money for a radio plugger and for an artist and all kind of stuff to sort of get the Fark You record off the ground, and to put an infrastructure around it.
I guess that's a second proof of concept then for you saying you can pick something early, because you've done that twice.
Yeah, so LTA and I had like a couple of great years together. I was working with some other stuff as well, but like LTA was like a big focus. And I mean, obviously, Mike, who has retired somewhat from music now, but like was, I think, a fantastic songwriter. And I think his songs still stand up to this day, especially Fark You and World Record, which are the two albums that I worked on. I would still listen to those now as a fan.
Yeah.
And I think those are really great, fantastic records that they made. And so that was kind of the next thing that I did, was work with LTA, who I then also lost to the same manager.
Oh,
yeah. So that was kind of...
Was it the same sort of process of them making the...
No, that was more of a...
You knew what was going.
That was more of a, I'll have that. I didn't negotiate a deal for them to be co-managed. Yeah, no, that was...
So was there some bitterness there with 5B?
Joey had moved on from 5B.
Oh, okay.
And was at a different agency, I think, actually working for himself.
Right.
But LTA went on tour with architects, on the tour where architects headlined Coco, I believe. Maybe it wasn't Coco, I can't remember.
Right.
But they supported them on that tour, and I guess somebody saw something he liked, and that was probably the only time that I took it a bit personally.
Yeah,
like
you were like, man, I'm working my ass off just to feed you bands.
Yeah, like I'm not especially proud of it, but I think I sent an email to the nature of like, if you like my ears so much, why don't you give me a job?
Yeah.
And I try to take these things with a little more grace and understand that this is part of the business that we're in. It can be a cutthroat industry. I don't think it has to be.
Yeah.
But it is. And I would be naive to see it as anything else other than that.
Yeah.
And so at the time, like, that was a gut punch, that one. Because I was like, I've just spent like money that your client paid out to me to build this. Like, wouldn't it make sense? I don't know. Wouldn't it make sense? I was kind of hoping that I would be brought into the 5B fold with architect.
Yeah.
And now, like 1 year later, and I've put all this effort into kind of rebuilding myself and building a new artist, that's gone as well. So at that moment, I was like, I am never doing this as a solo act ever again. And so from that point on, I sought to always have an agency around me. And it took some real soul searching to carry on at that point.
I was going to say, was that not even harder?
It was harder.
Second time round?
It weirdly, it was harder. Like, Lower than Atlantis were not, at the time that I lost them, were not as big a band as Architects at the time that I lost Architects. So you'd think really, more of a blow, but they were being played on Radio 1. Like, I got my first Radio 1 plays, like Zane Lowe debuted taping songs off the radio, I think, and like there was like Radio 1 support behind LTA, and that was to a degree that I had not experienced before. And so it felt like, hey, this investment of time and a little bit of money is like actually really working out. And I'd managed to, in a year, sort of bounce back to a point where I felt like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
It's going, it's working. To lose them again, to lose another artist, it was extra salt in the wound that it was.
I guess it was a little bit like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice.
Yeah, in that instance, I felt very much like, I don't think I did anything wrong this time. Like, so I'm not sure why this is happening. And so, I was like, perhaps I am in the wrong profession. Perhaps I'm doing something wrong. I don't know. And so it took a lot of, I certainly didn't have the get up and go to just crack on straight away. Like, after Architects, I almost had like a point to prove.
Yeah.
Especially after, the remark that I mentioned.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to be that guy. But that one, I felt very much like, what do I do now? It really took a lot out of me, and I'm kind of surprised actually that I carried on. It was really the fact that I couldn't see an obvious path at that point of anything else that I could do. And I had moved back to my parents' house at the time, because when I was touring with Architects a lot, I didn't want to keep up paying rent on a property, so I moved all my stuff back to my parents. So when I then lost Architects, I didn't have an income.
Yeah.
So I rebuilt Lower Atlantis from like the bedroom I grew up in, like age 26 or what have you. Like, I was a little older than that, but like rebuilding myself, my job, my career, and Lower Atlantis, like from my parental home. And so once I lost them, it was like, now I'm just this guy sat at home with no job prospects. Like, and I put years now, like 5-6 years into working in music, and now it feels a bit like the opportunities have dried up and I didn't really know what to do. And I definitely drifted for a little bit of time. And after I lost Lower Atlantis, like I felt like I had a further to go to pick myself up, and I wasn't sure whether I could really carry on. And around that time, I met my wife, Lauren, who, and so there was kind of a distraction from the career stuff, because we met and we started doing lots of traveling, and like I started having like a real personal life, which I hadn't really had up to that point for a few years, because I'd been busy with touring with Architects and working on LTA and all this kind of stuff, and had been a bit displaced from having a personal life.
I think that's something that people don't realise when you're a manager or you're an agent or something like that, that you really don't actually have anything outside of the job. The job's fucking cool, or it can be, but
it can be all-consuming.
It's all-consuming.
Yeah, it's really all-consuming. And certainly, like I said, after Architects, I had this real chip on my shoulder in a way, like a point to prove, and had thrown myself really, massively into it. and my personal life was suffering as a result of that. When I reflect on those years, Lauren and I still talk about this now. Like, my wife and I still talk about it now, like that. I'm not sure exactly how we managed to muddle through, but somehow we did. I was fortunate that I didn't have to go. I didn't feel the pressure to have to go and get like a job that was going to, take me away. I managed to do bits and bobs of work here and there, bits of, did some work I did assorted bits of work for some bands, and it just kind of kept me tapped in. But I still was kind of questioning the whole time of like, where am I really going? What am I really doing? I even at one point looked into, can I go back into journalism? Can I go back into PR? What is it that I really want to do with myself? And that went on for like a good year. And, but just from having stayed in it, I then came across Neck Deep in 2012. And that completely changed the trajectory. I don't think I would be sat here right now if I hadn't kind of made it through that year. And sort of, it was almost like Neck Deep was like the career reward at the end of like a year or so of drifting and having a bit of a crisis, really, having a bit of an existential crisis, a bit of a career crisis. Like, my personal life was great and taking shape, and but the job was very like, my wife and I reflect on it sometimes now. Like, she says when we met, like, it didn't seem like you really had a job. I was like, well, I sort of didn't. Yeah, I was kind of floating around, sort of trying to figure myself out and figure out what I wanted to do, and then Neck Deep was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, as it were.
So, I mean, I guess the thing is, like, you may have been struggling sort of personally with what you wanted to do, but you had amassed a wealth of knowledge. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't know if I want to work in music, but I know fucking everything about it. Mm-hmm. So you spot Neck Deep, and I guess all that experience puts you in the perfect position.
Yeah, it was instant. I instantly knew there was something there. And this is before they hadn't even played a show at this point. They'd not played a single gig. I found them through the song A Part of Me on YouTube. It was sent to me by a chap in the US. I was doing a little bit of work for a band called Brutality or Prevail. And they had independently released their album, and I was looking for license partners for it in global markets. And a chap in the US said, "Oh, you're from the UK. Have you heard of this band?" And sent me the video to A Part of Me. I'd not heard of them, and I was quite, at the time, like, I felt like I was quite tapped into like new UK bands, like hot UK bands, whatever. And so I was surprised that I hadn't heard of a band from the UK who were kind of doing numbers already. But it turns out they were big on Tumblr. I didn't have a Tumblr.
I didn't know they were big on Tumblr.
Yeah, I guess like people did Tumblr edits, and it was kind of happening in a space that I wasn't kind of plugged into.
Yeah.
And I got sent the video to A Part of Me, and like, it had a couple of thousand views on it. But at the time, I remember feeling like that was significant for a band that I hadn't really heard of, and that wasn't really anybody. And
it's just wild to think that a band that new are releasing a song that good.
Right, exactly. And
like,
yeah, exactly that. And it wasn't just that the song was good. There was something in Ben.
Yeah.
There was something in him that I was like, this guy has it. Yeah. He means it. And I don't know, like, you can listen to that song and his voice is breaking and cracking, and he's this young kid. He was 17, I think, as well. But like, there was just something about it. It had like a magic about it. And I emailed them pretty much straight away. And they were familiar with my name from Architects and LTA. And then actually some of the hardcore bands I'd done some work with, so VWP, Your Demise, Last Witness. Like I'd sort of floated around in the Ghost Fest scene.
Oh yeah, I remember Ghost Fest.
Yeah, just kind of helping out bands here and there, and that meant something to them. And so they wanted to take a meeting, and we met up on the day of their second ever show, which was in London at the Barfly. They were supporting Me Versus Hero on a little run of shows. I think it was like 4 shows or something. They played their first show the night before. So I'd gotten in touch with them a week or 2 prior, and I was like, can I come and see you live? And they were like, oh, we're going on our first ever tour like next week. So it just felt kind of cosmic. They played their first show, then they came to London in the day. We met up, had a chat, and essentially just went, shall we do it? Let's go. And I started working with them from that moment.
So did you have your agency at that point?
8 years of my life.
So at that point, were you set up with a management company? You felt
yes,
comfortable?
I was working with a management company that now no longer exists,
Okay.
or has morphed into something else. Actually, it was called Mythophonic, and now it's called 30th Century. So
Okay.
it's Enda Shikari's.
Yeah, I didn't realise that.
Yeah. So it's Enda Shikari's management agency. So I was doing. I was working a bit with them. It wasn't like a proper salaried position or anything like that, but I was sort of. I'd put this kind of slight layer of protection around me.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any, any bands that could really, I couldn't like demand a salary with anything. And so I took on Neck Deep, and very quickly it became apparent that they were going to need a lot of American support and all this kind of stuff. And obviously from my past experience, I was like, there is no way I'm letting this one get away. So I'm going to go and find myself an agency that has those real connections in the US, and that where I can be properly insulated and provide all the right framework and all the right team members and all the right advice for a band this hot. Like I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm not going to try and go at this alone, if only for my own sanity.
Yeah.
Let alone, them being poached or whatever. So I wanted to make absolutely sure that I could do everything in my power to be the best manager for Neck Deep that I could be. We very quickly got all of their early interest was from the US. They were not taken seriously here in the UK.
So how quickly from you finding them did they blow up?
It was instant. By the year anniversary of them being a band, we announced them signing to Hopeless. And I remember that because their first proper Kerrang feature is them holding a birthday cake with a 1 on it.
Wicked. That's insane.
Yeah, and that was kind of a picture concept that we came up with to be like, on the 1 year anniversary of this band, you're signed to Hopeless and you're on full page in Kerrang. Like it's a very, very fast trajectory.
That's ridiculous.
And like immediately, like the first thing we did together, so Rain in July was out digitally. And the first thing we did together was work on History of Bad Decisions, so that EP, and that premiered with Alternative Press. And so it was all coming from the US. All this interest was stateside.
So were Neck Deep the first UK band that Hopeless signed?
Yeah. First band they signed worldwide. They had done partnership deals they did a record for Enda Shikari.
Okay.
But for America.
Yeah.
And I think they'd maybe done something with Unit 6, but I don't know or maybe they'd had some interest in Unit 6. I don't know, but like they'd never signed a UK band like fully to the roster, and Neck Deep was the first. And so when Hopeless came knocking, which was very soon after History of Bad Decisions came out, it actually came from them they booked a trip to Florida, the band,
right,
as they booked like a Thompson's holiday to Florida to go to theme parks, because a lot of them are theme park enthusiasts. And so they went to Florida on almost like a team building exercise, because I'm not sure if you know if everyone's familiar with the structure of it, but like the band was assembled from sort of 2 different bands.
No, not at all.
So Ben and Seb and West are friends from their area.
Right.
And then at the time, Phil and Danny were from different places. Phil was in a band called Climates with Sam and Powell's, who are now in the band.
Right.
But at the time, they were a separate band. And Climates and cannot remember the name of the other band, but Lloyd and West were in a band together, and they'd played shows together. Ben was trying to do a Dallas Green-esque City in Colour,
Right.
singer-songwriter thing, and him and Seb and Lloyd did Rain in July just to put out online for fun because they were pop punk fans, because they were just dyed-in-the-wool Blink fans and just wanted to do it for a laugh, and it blew up, and they had to put a band together to play it. And so they asked Phil, who they knew from Climates, to play it, and Danny was someone who'd sent Seb an audition video or something. So they just kind of pieced this band together and had to get to know each other as a unit whilst being like a hype band. It was organically put together. It wasn't like manufactured artists, but like they didn't, you know, there was they're not like, they weren't five friends that met in college and formed a band.
Yeah.
Some of them were, some of them weren't. And they just kind of put themselves together and then started doing all this stuff. And so they went on this trip, and while they were out there, off sort of spontaneously, booked a show and played a show in Florida. Not something I would advise to do any band to do without a visa. However, it was a great decision because it showed that all this online attention they were getting from America was translatable to real life. Lots of people showed up. They played a crazy house show at someone's house. They played like a house party, and it was wild. And then the next day, like 24 hours notice, booked a venue, like a 200 cap venue, and it got completely rammed out. There's footage of this floating around still. And that footage went kind of the equivalent of a bit viral.
Yeah.
So it's like, who the hell is this band playing this crazy show in Florida with like stage divers and inflatables and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And off the back of that, Hopeless got in touch with us. And so once Hopeless were interested, that's where I was like, I really need to like put something around this. Because I don't know what I'm doing in the US, and I want to make sure that any blanks that there could be are filled, because I want to continue working with this artist and think we want to continue on this path. So I flew out to LA on my own dime, stayed on Eric Tobin, the VP of Hopeless, stayed on his couch.
Did you know him before then?
No, I knew him from signing it deep, but he was kind enough to put me up on his couch, and he's a legend. He still consider him somewhat of a mentor for me in the business. We're still very good friends to this day. But he put me up on his sofa, and he essentially introduced me to a ton of people in LA, and he helped me set up. He sort of said, here's this person, here's this person, here's this person. Sort of helped me network so that I got to know a lot of people in the relevant industry for Neck Deep, the sort of the Warped Tour world, Warped Tour RIP world. You know, I got to know in the space of like 5 days, took meetings with like the manager of Knuckle Puck, the manager of Taking Back Sunday, the you know, all these kind of artists, and ended up meeting Kevin Lyman. You know, I like also in the space of a week, thanks to Tobin's kind of helping me plug myself in. He was like, you know, introducing me to people. This is Leander, he works for Neck Deep. We've just signed them. They're exciting. You should have a chat. And so I spent a week in LA just going out for lunches and breakfasts and coffees and whatever with all of these people, and came back from it with a job opportunity.
That must have been the most exciting.
It was really
meeting these people, and this is where it could go.
Yeah, it was really exciting, but I was also in a being honest, I was in a race with my own anxiety.
Yeah.
As well, to be like, I really need to get a job. Like, I have to find somewhere. I need to house this band. I need to house myself and this band somewhere that's good and right ASAP, because otherwise, you know, it felt like at the time, like whilst it was popping in America, the sort of global industry and like the people that might be sharks, the people that might be vultures and stuff were not yet circling.
Yeah.
So I was like, I've kind of got this moment right now where I need to kind of build our ecosystem, and I need to make sure I'm included in the ecosystem, because as I saw a few years previously with architects, that can, you know, you can get excluded quite quickly when things start popping.
So, I mean, I guess you put together the team around them in the US and the UK.
Yeah, everyone.
So
there's people that work for the band now that I hired.
So did you literally sit down and be like, I need this, I'm going to go out and just fucking get it?
Yep. And I made sure that I was the person going out and getting it.
What was that process like then outside of that crazy week?
So the first thing I did was find myself a home. So I teamed up with KMGMT, who to this day still represent Atlantic, Point North.
That's cool.
Yeah, they worked with Tonight Live at the time. All sorts of stuff. Great, you know. And they were at the time hot desking in the Warped Tour office. So when I went for my job interview, well, not even a job interview, I went for a chat with the people from this agency, showed up at an address, walked into the lobby, waiting to have my meeting with Mike and Peter from K, and was like, this is the Warped Tour office. Like, that's Kevin Lyman, and these are all like Warped Tour adverts, and like, do you work for Warped Tour? And he was like, no, me and Kevin go way back, and I just work in this office space, but we're good friends. And I was like, this is the one I need. Like, the agency that is essentially like closely affiliated with Warped Tour, that's the one.
Absolutely, man.
And so we had a bunch of great conversations. Within a few weeks, that night, Neck Deep headlined Chain Reaction in Anaheim, and the show was crazy, and so that really helped sell it. And Mike, who runs K, Mike Kaminsky, he had come up in the business through Warped Tour and being day-to-day for Taking Back Sunday, and he said that the Neck Deep Chain Reaction show reminded him of early TBS, like the hype that was around early Taking Back Sunday. And he was like, yeah, I got to do it. And so he brought me in as to work. We all worked on Neck Deep together. So I was like the main person on the band in the UK, but then we worked as a team, sort of expanding the band.
So did they have a UK office?
No, it's just,
so effectively you worked.
I was working. Yeah, I worked from my house in my flat in Bristol, Brighton, and then Bristol, wherever Lauren and I went. We just moved around a bit, and I just worked for them from there. But I spent a lot of time in America in those early years, as you might imagine.
Yeah,
I was in the US a lot because it took the UK a little bit of time to catch up with their career.
How influential then was the Warped Tour?
Oh, it's everything. I don't think the band would have flourished to the degree that they did without it. Like, it was instrumental in establishing the band in the US, and we were fortunate that they were able to do it in full 3 times, but they also played it. We did a one-off show once at a Warped Tour date. I think it was 3 full Warped Tours. Yeah, 3. But it was just incredible, and we based album campaigns around it. We released Lifestyles to Get You off the back of a Warped Tour. We released Peace in the Panic off the back of a Warped Tour. You know, like literally the band walking around Warped Tour with lanyards with pre-order codes on it, selling them for $5, like Camden Market sellers. Or like, and that really, you know, and then walking around with the stage signs and stuff, you know. The environment of Warped Tour is not something I have seen anywhere else. There is an opportunity there to establish yourself as an artist. If you grind it, there's a way to work Warped Tour. There was a way to work Warped Tour where you could really make daily multiple connections and people are out there looking for their next favorite band, and you can just go, I'm your new favorite band. And the band were incredible at it. They were really good at doing that. They worked really, really hard. Neck Deep is, I mean, you know, we haven't worked together now for coming on 4 years, but they were one of the hardest working bands like that I've ever worked with. Like, they grind.
How much of a loss for the scene then do you think that losing Warped Tour is?
For incubating new artists, it's colossal. It's really, like, it is missing. You know, and this is not speaking, you know, I can't speak to the sort of negative aspects of the culture that came, you know, there are parts of that culture that were unhealthy and are best expelled and expunged from our scene, as has, you know, been widely discussed, especially in the last few years. But just speaking plainly as a tour that provided an incubation and experience, like, they call it punk rock summer camp. I know that's like a trope, but like, it truly is, like, it is a summer camp where you go in, you can go in bad at touring and you can come out good at touring. You can go in bad at marketing and playing live and come out good at it. It's like a summer college that will just train you in, like, it is a trial by fire of, like, can you still be good playing at 11 a.m. to, like, a few disinterested people, and can you attract people? Can you create a buzz? Because at Warped Tour you could create ripples that, like, you could become like a must-see artist. You could start the tour out being like, who's this? Yeah. And by the end of the tour, you're like playing to, you know, I did Warped Tour in full in 2017 with, I had Creeper and Neck Deep on the tour. I did it in full. And one of the bands on Creeper's stage was Not Loose. And I saw them become the hottest band in the world on Warped Tour. It was literally like in front of us. Like, every day it was like, this band is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as you move from state to state to state. I mean, it's just, there's nothing like it. Like, you play for half an hour, but you have a whole day of, like, marketing and there was kind of almost like it was its own ecosystem. Yeah. And it's a tour that just, it's like a circus. It goes from place to place to place. All the stage managers, all the vendors, all the bands, all the tour crew, everyone just goes from place to place. So you can forge these incredibly strong relationships in that environment that can then go on to be the artists that you tour with, or that you're friends with, or that become part of your network as an artist forever. Like, I know that Knocked Loose and Movements are really close bands. That happened in front of me on Warped Tour. Like, that relationship was forged there. Boston Manor and Trophy Eyes, who are touring together in the UK this month, they met on that Warped Tour and their friendships were formed on that. Like, I have just had the band Soft Cult feature on a track with Split Chain, my new artist. Soft Cult were on that Warped Tour. They were called Courage My Love, but I met them on that, and I stayed in touch with them ever since. And, you know, these kind of, like, direct, like, industry bands all in a incubator together for 35 days, going through, like, every state, every weather condition you could possibly imagine, like colossal rainstorms and 45-degree heat that melts the tarmacs of an airport. Like, literally something that happened. Like, you go through this shit, and by the end of it, it kind of puts, you know, it feel like you almost, like, earn a badge. Yeah, you have completed Warped Tour. You know, and for all the things that might have been wrong with it, and that you know, that aside, just as a thing that helped bands earn their stripes, I think it has yet to be that space has yet to be replaced. That vacuum has yet to be replaced.
TikTok are cutting it.
I mean, TikTok is,
Not the same.
it's not the same thing. Like, it's obviously an incredible marketing tool.
Yeah.
And I know that it's very cliched for an industry person to be banging on about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not as pro TikTok as like some people in the business are. I don't think it's the be all and end all. I think much like any social media, I'm old enough to remember, I was on MySpace.
Yeah.
And my band had a MySpace page, and I worked with architects when all we had was a MySpace page. And I've seen various social medias come and go, and various things that you must do that turn out to be things that you don't need to do at all. And so I think, much like anything, all social media strategy and all marketing strategies and anything like that, they're just part of a puzzle.
Yeah.
But what you cannot replace is the experience of band on stage, person in crowd, direct interaction with the fan, where you're playing your music and they're watching the music, and then they can come and speak to you at your merchandise stall and take photos with you and understand a bit more about who you are and buy in to your culture as a band. And you could go to Warped Tour and come out of it with like, oh, that's my new favourite band now. I just got a complete like 101 in who that band is, because I got to see them live, I got to buy their shirt, I got to meet them, I got to do X, Y and Z.
It's a different experience for the customer as well in Warped Tour, because I mean, I went once. I did San Diego, and
That's a good one.
it was really cool. We went as like a family holiday when it was announced that it wasn't going to happen again. We were like booking next
You
year.
went to the last one?
Yeah, was it like? I think it was like the last full tour that we went to.
Yeah, As It Is, we're on it.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, I think we actually watched those twice.
Yeah.
So
As It Is and Don Broco, we were on a stage with Don Broco.
definitely watched them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I was at the couple of California dates.
Right.
Been at the same time.
Yeah. So I mean, the San Diego one was awesome, and then we did like a little family trip, and we drove to Denver. But comparing that to like other festivals, I guess because they're set up beforehand, feels more like a substantial thing, and you're more disconnected from the band and the management and everything that's going on. Warped Tour just felt scrappy. Like you were there, and it's going up in the morning, it's going down on the evening. Like it felt way, like not less professional in like a negative sense, like just sort of like you're part of something. Yeah, like it's coming up around you and you're watching it, and
and
it
it's
felt
like
more raw.
It's like, here is your community. And like, if you're someone who's just getting into alternative music, it shows you like the breadth of it, because Kevin had hardcore bands playing it and metalcore bands playing it, and he had pop punk bands playing it, singer-songwriters, he had YouTubers doing meet and greets, he had XYZ, and Katy Perry fucking played Warped Tour, Paramore played Warped Tour, Glassjaw played Warped Tour. Like, most of your favourite bands like went through it, like, and you could just see everything. Like, you could see a slice of everything that was from this culture, and then you could go through an open market where it was like Hopeless Records, Fearless Records, Epitaph, everyone was kind of represented. And then like non-profits, and you could just learn. It was like a crash course in like, this is what the alternative music scene has to offer you. Here you go. Do you want to be a part of it? Yeah, cool. This is what it's like, and that's just, I don't know, there's an excitement to it, like you say, scrappiness. It feels like something that's very inclusive for a fan. I think I know there were various issues with with it in other senses, but as a kind of foundation, I think there was something really special about it. I've certainly not. I've been working in music now nearly 20 years. I've not seen anything else like it. I don't think it's the best thing in the entire world, but it is irreplaceable. And what it can do, and what it did do for multiple bands, not just ones that I worked with. I saw it. Certainly, I think Neck Deep and As It Is would both say like it was amazing. Creeper had a harder time on it, but they're a different sort of band. And I think Warped Tour helped them realise that they were a different sort of a band. And, you know, so you could kind of find out a lot about yourself on that tour.
With Hopeless, the CEO, we said that he thought it was crazy that the majors weren't taking more of an interest with the number of streams they were getting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think that they were getting the recognition they deserved?
I mean, early days, you know, they come a little bit from... they're long in the tooth enough now, which is a weird thing to say about Neck Deep.
Yeah.
They still feel like a young band.
They feel brand new.
They still feel new, yeah, in a lot of ways. And but they still come from the emphasis on streaming and the emphasis on like this kind of stuff has happened during their career. It's been kind of something that, you know, Spotify playlisting wasn't the absolute get when we started out, when we first released Wishful Thinking or whatever. It wasn't like, what Spotify playlist is Losing Teeth going to get? You know, it wasn't about that. That was, again, just a piece of the puzzle. And getting physical press was still the big golden goose egg, you know. And so we were chasing cover of Alternative Press, cover of Kerrang, all of which are things that they got. But like the Kerrang Awards was still a thing, and music videos on TV was still a thing, and Radio 1 playlisting was still something that we were like chasing down. And so there were all these different things, and like streaming was just still an evolving thing, really. And so early days of Neck Deep, like it wasn't so much that their streams were being ignored. It was the real world stuff that was happening that I felt, and I think the band also felt, was being ignored. Like there was a journalist at Kerrang who dismissed us out of hand, and who said UK pop punk, like that's not a thing, you know, that's not, why should we pay any attention to this? Like a British band that sounds like they're Californian, who cares, right? Because the scene back then was bands like Young Guns, The Havana and New Meat Six, and that was the UK sound. It was kind of more rock, radio rock, alternative rock. And so a band that sounded like Blink-182 or New Found Glory or something, but from Wrexham, people didn't really take that very seriously. And so they were underrated a lot for what we were achieving.
Yeah.
The fact that we could go to Florida and play a crazy show, was that sort of stuff was being overlooked, not by fans. That Neck Deep was very much like a fan-made band, I think. Like where they were underappreciated was that, yeah, it was Hopeless. It was a record label that understood the culture of where this band belonged. That's where they were appreciated and seen, and by their fan bases, they were around the world is where they were appreciated and seen. But like, it took a while with press outlets and, you know, sort of the institutions for them to open the door to Neck Deep. That we encountered some resistance in those early years, the first couple of years, and it wasn't until Life's Out to Get You in 2015, you know, I'd been working with the band since 2012.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 2015 that we felt like the door opened a bit more. And at this point, they'd already done a Warped Tour, and they'd done 2 full US tours as well. They toured the US in full 3 times. But I think by the time Life's Out to Get You came out, their first US tour was a co-headline tour with Knuckle Park.
Oh, cool.
You know, where they had sold out shows at the club level. We did a whole Warped Tour where, certainly in like markets like California and Philadelphia and New York, like some of the major markets, their crowds were crazy. I remember being out at Warped Tour 2014 in Pomona, California, watching Neck Deep play to like what I remember as just people, just a sea of people playing on like a tiny little stage. Weren't even like a main stage artist or anything like that. At like 2 p.m, you know, playing crazy shows at venues like Chain Reaction and what have you. But here we were like a first of 4. You know, it took a while for the industry to sort of acknowledge like, oh, this is actually something that's happening. You know, I don't think it mattered back then that majors weren't paying attention, because we'd built our own ecosystem. We had Hopeless, we had great agents around the world. You know, we had a great booking agent in the US, great booking agent in the UK, and that was all we really needed. And we had our management team, which was 2 people in LA, me in the UK. One of the first full tours Neck Deep did was a headline tour of Australia, and it was rammed.
I guess it's funny because a lot of bands spend a long time trying to build themselves up in the UK so they can make the step and go into America.
Yeah, we just hit America
Just
immediately.
bypassed.
Yeah, we just bypassed it. We bypassed this kind of like, we're just like, let's just build this as a global entity and go where people want us to go. And the demand was in the US, and then there was demand in Australia. And it felt like it took until Lifestyle Out to Get You for the UK to go, actually, you're one of our bands. You're a UK band, aren't you? Yeah, we'll take a bit of ownership over you now. And I think similarly that happened a bit with Bring Me the Horizon. I think similarly it happened a lot with Asking Alexandria. You know, like bands that America was kind of supporting a little bit before the domestic.
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing Bring Me in Austin. Was it Austin? Yeah, Austin. And they were playing a festival. I can't remember what the festival was called. It was like a last minute thing where we were over there, we got the tickets, and it was a baseball stadium. Mm-hmm. So like they were literally playing on the pitch. It was really cool. It was ridiculous. But I remember us being there and being like, I didn't realise that was so big.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Ollie was like the first UK musician to be on the cover of Alternative Press since fucking Radiohead or something.
Oh, no, why?
It was some like crazy thing like that. Yeah, Bring Me's career was, I think, quite US led and whatnot. And like Neck Deep was just a project that took a little time for en masse for people to take seriously, especially, you know, they play a genre that's not, you know, necessarily like obviously Blink-182 are like one of the biggest bands in the world.
Yeah.
But like as a whole, like pop punk is somewhat of a maligned genre, isn't it? Like it's because it has Bolivar Soup or whatever, like it's a bit silly, you know, and it's not like necessarily like super credible. And obviously there's now a movement of it that is kind of cooler, like Story So Far and bands like that. Like, but Neck Deep were just kind of, I think it took a while for the world as a whole to sort of catch up with what they were achieving in real life, you know, because they didn't get like the same looks or, you know, whatever that like other artists, they didn't necessarily hit the same markers that you would associate with like success.
Yeah.
But in real world, they were touring and playing to like sold out crowds every single day. And it just took a while for that story, I guess, to translate.
Wish You Were Here has almost 200 million streams.
It went viral in Indonesia.
Is that what happened? Because
that's after my time, but I heard about that from Hopeless. Yeah, it went. Someone did a cover of it on TikTok, and it went viral.
Right.
And yeah, it hit in Indonesia, and then now the band have like from what I understand, like something really substantial going on in Indonesia, and that has really boosted the streams of that song. That was not a song we released as a single.
No,
I actually worked that record with them, The Peace and the Panic, and Wish You Were Here was not one of the like songs we put forward. It wasn't a single. It didn't have a music video. Like, you know, it's that happened after the fact, and that is really a next gen technology thing that's happened for them. I haven't been a part of that. That's happened since we parted ways.
Financially, what did that album mean to the band? Because I mean,
which record?
Peace of the Panic. Because it's got like 100 million streams on some of the songs. Like, what? How does that break down and actually change the band's life?
I mean, it was made on an independent budget. It was made we made that record with Mike Green. It was made on a relatively modest budget. It wasn't made for like, you know, we got a bit of a contractual increase on it because that was meant to be the band's last album with Hopeless.
Right.
And obviously they were wanting to keep the band. So they extended the contract and added what became All Distortions Are Intentional, added an option on it. But that was we were able to do some negotiation where them adding an option gave us a little more money in the pot for marketing and for recording of the Peace and the Panic, but by no means is it anything remotely close to what like an album budget would look like for Dua Lipa or the 1975 or whatever. Like, it's not a major label budget. It was an independent budget. It was.
Has that worked out in the band's favour for it being, it's recouped and now
I don't know. I'm no longer. I haven't been privy to the royalty statements for 4 years, so I assume that it's going well. I'm still in contact with some of them, and the band looks like it's going great.
How come you're not with the band anymore?
COVID, burnout, all sorts of a multitude of reasons.
Poached by Joey.
Imagine. No, not this time. No, we were together nearly 8 years, Neck Deep and I, and we traversed our way through 3 different management agencies. So I was at Mythophonic when I started with them. Then we moved to KMGMT. We were there for the longest portion of my time with the band was at KMGMT. We were there for 4 years. And then we moved to an agency called IE, which is the management company for Robbie Williams. Cool. We were there for the last couple of years of my time with them. And now they're at 5B, not with Joe. With Ian Dickinson, who looks after a bunch of bands. Yeah. I had hit a burnout in the job. I had just I had a daughter. My wife and I had a daughter as I was joining iMusic, and she turned 1 just before COVID. And Neck Deep and I parted ways midway through COVID. So trying to work at the time, a band of the level Neck Deep were, whilst being a new parent, and then facing a global pandemic, various puzzle pieces, various external pressures weighed into things not working with us anymore. It was a mutual parting of ways. We were no longer a good fit for each other. What they needed and demanded from and expected from management, which is nothing, that's not to say it was unreasonable. What they needed and what I was able and, to be honest, willing to provide at that moment in time, these things did no longer align. And over 8 years, a lot of things can build up. And we had worked together. They'd never not had me as a manager. I'd worked with them from their second ever show. We'd been together this entire time. And across the course of 8 years, as you can imagine, you change in life. They grew up in Neck Deep. When Neck Deep first started touring the US, Ben and Danny were not old enough to be in the venues that they were headlining. But obviously they got the exemption because they were the headliners, but they couldn't. They played Las Vegas and they couldn't go into the casinos for the first few tours that they did out in the US. Like, they were getting to know each other as a band, whilst being a headline level artist, whilst having to deal with the pressures that come with being a hot band, a successful band, a band that's touring the world 8-9 months of the year. By the time you get 8 years into a career, they have girlfriends, they have partners, they have fiancés, they have mortgages, they have this. Their life changed. I had a child, and suddenly you find yourself going, gosh, feels like we don't really fit anymore. And what I need, what you need, there was just a disconnect. And I think we're perhaps all guilty of not seeing the wood for the trees, not appreciating maybe each other at the time. But I think it was just ultimately inevitable, especially with COVID. COVID stripped us of an album campaign. The band had put a lot of work into writing and recording All Distortions Are Intentional, and we'd set up a lot of cool things, a whole global touring campaign in the wake of that record. We got to do none of it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the pandemic obviously shut the world down, and the frustrations that came with that, I guess, metastasized for all of us in various areas, and priorities shifted. Certainly for me, you know, I can only speak to myself, I can't speak on their behalf, but certainly for me, my priorities shifted because I had a newborn daughter at home, and you know, I wanted to support my family, and things just stopped working. That's the long story short of it. It was no longer a good fit. Something that had been a good fit and had been a great success for a long time suddenly felt like perhaps we're doing more damage than good to each other.
Yeah.
And there was an opportunity for me to exit, and I took it. But at that moment in time, I was burned out on the entire job. I quit management. I didn't like quit Net Deep or get fired from Net Deep or anything like that. It was, I quit the job. Like, I felt that at that moment in time, that being a manager and being a parent were no longer compatible in any way. And it was showing in my ability to do the job in the way that my bands, my clients would want me to, would expect, because my attention was divided. My ability to commit in the way that I had committed for all of that time, I just couldn't do it anymore. Not only that, I wasn't willing to do it anymore to that same degree at that moment in my life. And so it just fell apart. And it wasn't some big catastrophic, cataclysmic event. It was chipping away. And it was something that really, at the moment where I did step back, I realised, like, this has been coming. This has been coming for a year.
Did you have a plan on what you wanted to do move forward, or was it just like, I
quit to nothing. I quit to nothing. I took a voluntary redundancy, left the band at IE, and they then changed that situation for themselves a year later, moved to 5B. But I left, took a voluntary redundancy and left to nothing, was just at home, and fortunately was in a position to have the redundancy sort of allowed me 6 months to figure out what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure at that precise moment in time whether I wanted to stay in music. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had hit a wall with all of the stuff that I'd done in those 8 years. You know, I'd also worked with As It Is for 5 years. I worked with Creeper for many years. Like, it was a very intense period of my career, from finding Net Deep to the pandemic. Those 8 years were life-changing in good and bad ways. There was a lot that happened, a lot that went down. There were a lot of stresses with Net Deep that they encountered.
Was Net Deep the main reason you wanted to leave management, or was it a combination of all the bands you were working with?
By the time I left, I was only working with Net Deep. So As It Is and I had parted ways through the band had kind of started to fall apart. So a couple of original members had left, and it felt like it wasn't really a project that we could work on together anymore, like at that time. So I'd already stopped working with them. Creeper didn't move with me from K to IE. They went straight to Indica. So they didn't. We'd already parted ways a couple of years previously. They just, they and I just when I moved, they didn't want to make that move. They didn't want to move to that agency. They wanted to go somewhere else. I was going to IE. So
IE doesn't have much rock or alternative, does it?
Well, now they just have Robbie.
So I went and spoke with the guy that owned it. I think he's passed away now.
David.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, this is like several years ago when I was starting the charity, and I just got an intro being like, "You should really go speak to him." So I went and spoke to him. And he was awesome.
But I never got to meet David.
He was great. I only met him once. He was really nice. But I remember like going to the office and it just being very sort of pop.
It was. Yeah, it was a pop agency.
Yeah.
And, you know, they'd worked with Robbie through his absolute heyday. You know, they do a good job of finding opportunities for him in this stage of his career. And, you know, the names of a lot of my co-workers are in the credits of that Netflix documentary, you know. But it was a move that the band wanted to make. And we took a chance. I did not feel like it was the right place for me.
Right.
That's what contributed to my burnout more than, I would say, Neck Deep. It was more the environment in which I was working with Neck Deep it was all just misaligned. And I'm not trying to cast any shade on IE or on Neck Deep or anyone. It was just, we tried something. It was an experiment. I had some reservations about that experiment, but you never know. I took a chance on it, and if you ask me, I felt like it was an unsuccessful experiment. So I hit a wall. Like I say, I hit a wall with it, and I just felt like I don't want to do this job anymore. At all. I don't want to work for Neck Deep. I don't want to work for IE. I don't want to work for anyone. Like, I just do not want to be doing this. It just does not fit with my life. And so, I quit to nothing and spent a good 3 months in the end of 2020, from sort of October 2020 till Christmas, deliberating what I wanted to do.
So did it take you the full 6 months to decide?
It took me the full 6 months to get a job.
All right.
But I knew in half the time what I wanted to do. So initially I wasn't sure whether I wanted to work in music. I'd always had this dream of going right back to when I'm like, you know, college kid, always has this dream to be a writer. Obviously I've pursued journalism for quite a while.
Yeah.
But I'd always had this vision of myself, like maybe one day, like writing novel, you know, the great novel. Not the great novel, but a novel. Yeah. I felt like I had a novel in me. I sometimes still wonder whether I do, I don't know. But I was wondering at the time whether to explore that or not. And the author, Ian McEwan, is one of our family friends. And I got an opportunity to like ask him, like, you know, how do you sort of get into writing? Like, what advice would you have for an aspiring writer? He was so kind as to give me like a whole email suggestion of like, kind of like mentor advice of like, if you want to do it, like think about it like this and blah, blah, blah. And getting that from him was very sobering, because I was like, I don't think I do want to do that actually. Like, I love creative writing.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, but I don't think I've got it in me to like commit heart and soul to it to the degree that, you know, he was suggesting that you might need to. Just didn't feel like that was me. And ultimately, like, music is my first love. That's where I've always been. I was a music fan, then I was in bands, multiple bands.
Yeah.
Then I was always worked in it. And I just felt like that is where ultimately I do feel like I belong. That's where I feel like my place is. But it's like figuring out how to monetize that so that you can like put food in your kid's mouth, right?
Yeah.
So what's the next stage? And so through kind of exploring what are the aspects of the job that I like, what is it? Let's get down to fundamentals. What do I think I'm good at? I think I am good at finding bands when they're raw and going, there's something in that. And hearing through scrappiness, or a singer before he's had singing lessons, or, you know, a band playing live before they have any good gear or in-ear monitors, or hearing like a shit demo that's been recorded with MIDI drums and going, that's a hit, that's a good band, and separating wheat from chaff.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like that is a skill that I have honed and developed over the years to what allows me to do that. And at that time, I realised it's A&R, it's label work. If you can get a job working in like talent discovery and talent development, where is it that they do that? I do that at record labels. That's where they do that. I need to go work for a record label. That was my kind of eureka moment, right? Like during the pandemic, I was like, that's what I need to be doing. I need to go work in A&R. And like, I feel like it's something I've always done anyway, because my management career was finding young bands and helping them develop and helping them find themselves. Like, I feel like I did play, I played a bit of an A&R role in early Architect stuff. I played quite a lot of an A&R role in Low Atlantis, actually. And, you know, in many ways, I was actually talking to Mike Juice about this year, how I feel like in many ways, like Far Q was like my first A&R project in many ways. Like I worked on that record in a way that I hadn't worked with other records. Like I listened to all of the demos at all stages and was giving input on like, oh, maybe you should try and do this with this song, or we need this kind of a song or this kind of a song, and like helped really piece that record together in a way that I realised is the A&R job. And I really enjoy that stuff. I love being in the room where records are getting made. And I'm not a producer. I don't have the skills of, you know, a Dan Weller, a Kel Pinchin, a Mike Green, and whatever. Like, I'm not someone who can sit in a studio and know how to use. I don't know how to use Logic at all. You open Logic in front of me, I'm like, what the fuck, you know? That's all magic to me still. But I feel like I've got an ear for like how a song could go, and I can make sometimes constructive suggestions on like how a vocal hook should go, or how a guitar part should go, or how rhythm should go, or like what the artwork should look like, or how a record should be track listed. Yeah. I love track listing albums. That's like one of my weird joys in life, is like, please let me help with the track listing. I like to create like the flow, or help create the flow. And so working at a label, doing that kind of work for multiple artists, and not needing to worry about necessarily how they pay their mortgage, seemed very appealing at that point in time. So I sort of identified that as the job I wanted to do, and then I just went about using my network to try and get it, to try and find someone who would employ me to do that. And there was, you know, these sorts of jobs are not really advertised. You're not going on like
Indeed.
Yeah, you're not going on Indeed and being like, oh, independent punk rock label is looking for an A&R guy, why let me apply? Like, that's not how that works. These are often internal hires, or like you're working in one job at the label and you just sort of fall into it because you're already in the ecosystem. So I had to sort of go out there and just sort of, much like how when Eric at Hopeless plugged me into the US industry, and I ended up finding my management job for Neck Deep back in the day, I just kind of threw myself out there and started just trying to set up conversations with people and being like, hey, like, I'm interested in getting into A&R. Here's kind of my discovery CV, Architects, Neck Deep, Creeper, Low Atlantis as it is. You know, it's built up at this point to like bands I can point to as being something of significance. And I was quite encouraged by how many people were up for a conversation, you know. And through a process of a few months, it kind of came down to UNFD, Unified Music Group, offering me that position of coming on as an artist development manager, which was kind of a pseudonym for A&R for development, young bands, new signings. And so I was tasked with, initially on a consultancy basis for the first few months, and then right as my last bit of redundancy money ran out, I got a full-time job. So it was like right up. It was like squeaky bum time for the last month. I was like, shit, like, we are like out, basically going to be out of money. But yeah, fortunately, I was able to just about secure it. So yeah, I was brought in as an A&R consultant initially, and I was tasked to find bands, source bands, look at their stats, kind of establish like what's happening, like what's exciting. So the Harriet was an early discovery of mine. We weren't successful in signing it, but that was something I was on early with UNFD. Nightlife was a band we were on really early. Mood Ring was a band we signed. And then also, as well as doing the external signing and kind of talent scouting, I was starting to work internally with some of the bands that were already signed to the label to kind of do the A&R side of the job. So the sort of working with the bands on the label to give mix feedback and give demo feedback and suggest artists or music video directors, or like work with the whoever it is in the band that has like the creative vision to sort of translate that vision into like marketing strategies and communicate the sort of creative vision to the rest of the label team so that we could build out these campaigns around it. And that was really like, it ended up being, for that moment in time, like the perfect environment for like what I wanted to do, because it was creatively focused, but it was just working with the band in kind of the purest environment possible. Like they weren't going like, how am I going to pay my bills? Yeah. Or like, I'm stressed because of XYZ thing that's happening on tour. I was meeting the bands in this space where it was just talking about like their art, and it helped me, I guess, fall back in love with working in music, because it was mostly very positive environment.
I mean, that whole experience sounds like it was really, really nice, and you really enjoyed it.
It was healing.
How come you've then made the decision to go back into management, and you've just joined probably the UK's fastest growing management company?
Yes.
Future History, which with the speed that's growing at, I imagine comes with all the stresses of everything that you said you
glutton for punishment
was a bit shit the first time.
No, it was a conscious choice. Where so what I needed when I first joined Unified was I needed to heal.
Yeah,
I was really burned out. I didn't even know whether I wanted to work in music anymore, and so it provided this perfect environment for me to kind of be part of a team. It was really amazing learning for me, quite honestly. Like, I put my time, I equate my time at Unified to almost like getting to go back to university and doing like another course, like a master's in a different aspect of the music industry. I'd never worked at a label. I'd been on tour, I'd worked with bands as publicist, I'd been a journalist, I'd done all this. Something I hadn't done is work at labels. I'd worked with label teams, but very much from the perspective of like, you're the label, you have to do this thing for my band, fuck you. And like working at the label and then being on the receiving end of some of that stuff, I feel like I gained some real learning and some real insight into like, there were definitely, in my first year at Unified, I would have like intrusive thoughts, emails that I had sent, being like, wish I could unsend that email from 2016, because I now like sort of realise how
it was perceived at the other end.
Would have been perceived at the other end, because I'm sitting there reading these emails going, fuck you, man, and then being like, oh, wait a minute, I've definitely sent this email, and then just getting a bit more of it really helped me get a rounded view of things. But what I detected was that there is, maybe now more than ever, a real vacuum, and we've talked about this a little bit, talking about Warped Tour. There's a vacuum in the artist development space. There's not many managers working in it. There's not many agents working in it.
Yeah.
Like, you've got agents and managers that have their established artists, and then you have a sort of pool of like people, hopefuls, who want to make it. But like in this kind of space of like breaking bands and bringing them through, there's not that many people. And so from a label perspective, I would have these great bands on the label and we were struggling to find teams for them. You know, there's a bunch of great bands on UNFD who do not have good ecosystems around them. A lot of them are on their own. They're just sort of muddling through and they've got the label part of it done, but they can't get a manager or they can't get an agent. And I realized that the world had really changed post-COVID, where like people are willing to, not as able, it's not even a case of willingness really, people are not as able to take risks.
Yeah.
Because these incubator things like Warped Tour and whatever are gone. And there's so much emphasis now on like, how hot are you on TikTok? How what are your headline numbers? What are your streaming stats? That this kind of, the stuff we did with Neck Deep, the kind of growing up in public, the going everywhere and playing shows and making proof of concept IRL, right? That's not as easy. And things like Brexit and the hugely increased costs of US visas have been prohibitive. In, you know, Europe used to be this amazing incubator pre-Brexit where you could just be like, right, this band needs to get better at playing live, send them to Europe for like 2 months, right? You just go out and tour Europe in kind of like a relatively low risk, just go out there, drive around, play wherever. And I did a 2-week tour of Europe with Architects once, and they were playing to like no one, man. They were playing to like the fucking chef who made the rider in some venue in Amsterdam. But that they learned in those instances how to be good when there's no vibe.
Yeah.
Right. But all these kind of environments, it's like you have to come out of, you have to say, I'm a new band and we're amazing. And it feels like there's this pressure now of like, you have to be the finished product immediately. And obviously there's great scenes, like there's a fantastic hardcore scene blossoming in the UK. You know, there's a bunch of amazing regional pockets in Glasgow, in Brighton, in Leeds, in Sheffield, where there's like really organic, like almost back to like back to zine culture, back to cassettes, back to like completely insular. There's almost like an unwelcoming of industry contact really, and these organic scenes are popping up again, and that's really exciting to see. But in this kind of like where you're trying to make it and have your band be full time, there's this insane pressure to just be instantly brilliant. Not only instantly brilliant, but like you have to look the part, you have to sound the part, you have to have the right stats, you have to have the right hype, and yet you have to have all this kind of shit that you've done that you can provide to the industry without having had anyone invest any time in you. And so there's a lot expected of bands now to be content creators, to be marketing experts, to kind of do the jobs of this whole section of the industry that has been made redundant because of COVID, financial crisis, yada, 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 millions of different mitigating factors. But it's created a bit of a chasm in the business where it's harder to just be a band that's grinding it out, like in incrementally, month on month, year on year, building it. And I guess over my time at Unified, the point I'm making is that, sorry, I'm a verbal processor. The point I'm making is that whilst the work was very fulfilling for me personally, I started to get frustrated that I couldn't further influence some of the opportunities for the bands. It was like, we've made this great record, but there's no manager to help push it over the edge. There's no agent to kind of take this great record that we've made and put it in rooms in front of people. There's this chasm, and I started just feeling this like, I want to help more, but you know, the company was like, that's not your job, that's not your remit. And it's like, no, it isn't, you're right. And I shouldn't overstep my boundaries, and I shouldn't be like sitting on calls with managers being like, you should do this. That's not my job. I'm a label person, and I know that certainly some of my early learning at the label was that I was stepping on managers' toes sometimes. And I understand that. I completely respect it, and I have to respect the boundary of like, you're the manager. I'm just here to like say help in a label capacity. But I guess I felt like I wanted over time actually to be able to influence it more.
So that's where Future History
that's where the desire to come back into management came from. It's one of those thoughts that was percolating, and I hadn't fully like really recognised it. And then at the start of this year, there was some reshuffling at Unified, and I started thinking about my future. That Unified made some changes, and I no longer felt like that was necessarily where I wanted to be, or where I could do my best work. It was no longer felt like an environment where I could necessarily thrive, and that's not necessarily just to do with Unified. It's also to do with like industry factors, and like I'm talking about this vacuum, this vacuum that was created. I needed to like be able to go into that vacuum and actually fill it, not be frustrated that it exists. And so it's kind of a bit more like, I feel like I need to be a bit more back in the driving seat of the artists that I'm working with. I need to be able to push this a bit more, and go those extra steps, and not just be like, well, we made a great record, hope it does well, you know. And it came about through Split Chain, the band Split Chain from Bristol. We met at a very opportune moment when I was thinking about getting back into management, and they were starting to get label interest. It's quite similar to Neck Deep. They'd been a band a year already though,
right?
And had lots of stats and lots of hype, and were looking to formalise that and to find a label deal and to build a team. And we just met at a great time where I was starting to think about getting back to management. They needed management, and it was almost like spur of the moment. We were on a call. I was just getting to meet them, and it was just like, do you want me to manage it? And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay, let's fucking go. And it was almost like this, I realised that this had been coming. And obviously I couldn't manage a band and be at Unified.
Yeah.
Because it's a label job. And so I left Unified, and I have been wanting to talk to Ryan about joining Future History for several years. It is one of the places that when I was moving with Neck Deep, when they wanted a management change after their time at KMGMT, Ryan was someone that I wanted to speak to, but the band very much wanted to go to IE. And so you have to respect the desires of the client, right? And so we did that. But Ryan was someone that I'd wanted to talk to. And so he was immediately the first person I was like, I've got to talk to Ryan. I've been meaning to have this fucking conversation with him for years, because we know each other going back to 2003.
Yeah, of course.
I met Ryan at, I think, his first show in Funeral for a Friend.
I know why.
My band played with Funeral for a Friend at Newport TJ's in 2003. We flipped a coin over who would headline. Although my intention was always to make them headline because they were much better than us. But I'm pretty sure it was Ryan's first and Gareth's first shows, because Ryan had come over from Hondo, and Matt was stepping forward as a solo singer. They'd gotten rid of the screamer, and Ryan was taking over that screaming. And we met at that. And so we've known each other over 20 years. His band was obviously enormously more successful than mine, but then we're both musicians from the same scene that ended up in management, and it just felt like I've been watching what he's been building and all this stuff, and obviously like Loathe and Holding Absence alone, let alone fucking Sleep Token, like it amazing what Ryan's built by himself. And I was just like, I just think that we're probably very aligned in how we want to do this job and the kind of artists we want to work with and the kind of culture and ecosystem that we want to create. And yeah, I had a call with him, and I mean, within an hour phone call, it was like, yeah, let's go. Like,
Awesome.
and then, and one more additional cosmic thing to that, in tandem with this, completely unrelated, as it is, we're reforming, and they and I have stayed very close friends. Patty has been a babysitter for my daughter. Like, you know, I was at Patty's wedding. Like, we're mates.
Yeah.
But Patty himself had gone through a lot of stuff. He's actually someone you should probably talk to on this. He's a big mental health advocate.
I'd love to.
But he's gone through his own journey, and himself had quit music, which is a crying shame, because he is truly, I say this just as a person, like a music fan, not as his manager. He's one of the most talented people I've ever met in my entire fucking life. He's unbelievable. He's truly like a rarefied talent. But he was burned and had a lot of struggles himself. But he was getting the band back together. And him and Ben told me, and I was like, do you know what I'm doing? I'm actually getting back into management. And we were like, let's just get the whole thing back together. Let's just all do it. So I started at Future History with Split Chain and As It Is. And that's kind of where we're at.
It's really sort of amazing that at the end of, 15, 20 year period, that it all just sort of like comes back together.
20 next year.
At the end. Like, I mean, at the end, but you know what I mean? It's like all these different things happen and then everything aligns again.
Yeah, and it's there's been a bunch of things this year that have felt to me like this feels right, and I feel like I'm in tune now with whatever energy, right, in my life. I feel like I've tapped into something where I can feel like this is the right thing to do. Going back into management felt right. Working with Split Chain felt right. Like the fact that then I was able to like connect with Ryan, someone I've known since 2003 and have always wanted to speak to, and that us coming together professionally and him bringing me on at Future History was such a natural, easy thing to do. If we both talked on a call about like, this just feels like, Ryan said, it feels to me like this has been a long time coming. And I was like, I think that also, you know, like it just feels that way. And Ryan is a lovely man, and like the right sort of temperament for this job. I think he's very relaxed, very chilled, very chilled man. And I think if you can be that way, and despite all the sort of struggles, and he's been through it himself, you know, Funeral for a Friend had an enormous rise and then a bit of a fall, and he's been through a lot of those things. He's experienced that stuff. He's experienced success, and you know, as a manager, he's faced some hardships. Like, we've had quite a similar sort of life path in a lot of ways. We come from the same sort of cultural background, like in terms of the scene, you know. We know a lot of the same people and stuff like that. It's just, we feel like we're from the same cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways, and it's a very organic sort of fit. And the fact that As It Is, we're reforming, separate to my influence or anything like that, just they were coming back together themselves. Patty and Ben have been on their own journey, and all of this stuff just feels right. And so I guess, why did I go back into management? It's because it just felt like what life was sort of telling me to do. Also, my daughter's like 5 now, and you know, it's not the same. Yeah. So the main thing I would take from it all, though, and the main thing I would say is that I'm going back in now with eyes open. I've gone in knowing, where did I hit burnout? Why did I hit burnout? You know, and I feel like I'm able to go back in and protect myself and my family and my own self. I know what I need as an individual and as a parent and as a husband, and I have multiple responsibilities in life, but I'm going into the job not accidentally. I'm going into it intentionally.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was kind of like, now it's kind of like, I know what I want to do. I know how to do it. I know what not to do. I know where I fucked up in the past. It's on me to put in boundaries as well. So when artists are calling me at 10:30 to moan about whatever, right? Like, it's on me to go, hey, can we have this call another time? Is this like an emergency? I need to state those boundaries myself, and I didn't before. And so some of these toxic dynamics, I guess, and unhealthy dynamics you might get into in the job, they're as much on you as they are on the band.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you tell someone how to treat you, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm going into it now being more like, I know how to carry myself better in the job, I suppose.
Well, I guess it sounds like it's a pretty exciting time then.
It's a really exciting time. It's a really exciting time for the artists that I'm working with, but not only that, I think it's a really exciting time for the company. Obviously, Sleep Token is a generational thing that, you know, anyone that's been around alternative music for more than 5 years knows, like, that doesn't come along every day, something like that. And it's an amazing thing to witness. But I think it's also a really exciting time for alternative music. I think we're now seeing, in the last few years, I think we're seeing some of the most diverse artists, like, not only in like the makeup of the personnel in the bands, but also like the music that's being produced. Like, who would think that a record as heavy as the Not Loose record would be as big as it is? I think that's amazing. I think it's to see a band like Turnstile be as successful as they are. Like, the music scene right now reminds me the most of the music scene that I grew up in, the 90s, like, where grunge and nu metal and heavy metal and all these things all coexisted on bills, and you would get Converge touring with Cave In, or like whatever, like this sort of mixed bill, genreless, like the sort of diversity of music that's out there now feels like it's at a very exciting time. And I think it's been a little stagnant for a time, and I think there's been a lot of factory line, like box checky, identikit bands out there. A lot of people just going like, what is the formula? What is the formula for success? And I think now we're seeing a time where art is coming a bit more to the forefront, and I celebrate that greatly, because I think that you have to be, first and foremost, fuck all the stats, all that stuff. What matters most at a fundamental level, the thing that people will remember is, are you making good art, right? Like, no matter whether it's a pop punk record or a heavy metal record or a mathcore record, whatever, whether pop record, all of these things can be substantive, and that's what it do you have something of substance, right? And I think we're now seeing an alternative scene that is full of people that actually want to say something, right? That want to do something. I don't necessarily mean political standpoint, whatever, but that want to produce something that feels fresh to them, that feels exciting to them, that is different, and that isn't just like, I am copying your homework. You know, and that's a really exciting thing to be a really part of again, I think.
Good point to be coming back into it. I think we are out of time for today. So thank you very much for coming and talking. It's been really fucking interesting. Just been great having you here.
Yeah, cheers, man.
So, I mean, I'd love to invite you back another time for us to sort of pick back up.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone that's listened. If you want to watch us, we're on YouTube. We'll catch you next time.